Hey everybody, we're gonna hang out here for a few and then we're gonna get rolling. Welcome everybody. One more minute, folks. We'll just wait one more minute and then we're gonna get rolling. The sun is about to go behind that cloud up there, which not great during the day, but eventually it does get back there, and it's nice to have it back there when it's time for the talk. Okay, I'm going to get started here, Paul. I'm going to go. Paul, can you make sure it's you're recording here on Zoom, please? Hey, everybody. Welcome tonight to this lecture, the second lecture in our Vice President series. Welcome to this. It's May 17th. We've been in quarantine here in Seattle for about 2 months now, give or take a couple days. This is probably, let's see, 3, 6, 3, 5, 7, 9. This might be around the 10th or 11th or 12th lecture I've done in there. Really been honored to have many of you join for many of these, and certainly tonight. This is gonna be a fun one tonight because there's really no downsides to kind of thinking about or kind of like speculating about who's gonna be the VP for Joe Biden or the VP nominee for Joe Biden. But then it also is tricky. It's tough. It's challenging. A lot of things to think about. So I've been kind of nervous about this all day because I've been like, what? I know that at the end of this lecture, I need to kind of, just because I owe it to everybody, just kind of gotta make my picks. But I've been going back and forth, not really sure what to do. So I changed a couple of thoughts just like 15 minutes ago. All right. So, hey, welcome tonight to Vice Presidents from JFK to Joe Biden. If this is your first time with us, welcome. I'm David Domke. I'm real glad to have you here. Okay, gonna hop to it here. So Biden's choice, Joe Biden's choice. Joe Biden made a fairly dramatic statement in his debate with Bernie Sanders when they did it live in the CNN studio on March 16th, where Biden said that night that I commit to picking a woman to be vice president. He had not said this before. He had not really even specifically kind of hinted at it. All right. So I want to just to get us going here, just want to show you this kind of 2-minute answer that he has where he says a couple really important things. All right. That includes the comment about the vice president.
So Lit Mobile just sent me this solar wireless battery pack. I'm excited. Let's see what's inside. I really like.
The World Health Organization calls the climate crisis a, quote,
Number one, I committed.
So here we go. This is his answer on this debate on March 16th.
One, I committed that if I'm elected president, have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue. Secondly, if I'm elected president, my cabinet, my administration.
So I understand you can't see the video. Hang on a second here. My screen sharing is paused. All right, here we go. Let's try it again. Still working out the kinks here. Let's give it a shot here.
I commit.
Okay. Gonna give it another run here. Let's see. I am screen sharing.
That if I'm elected president, I committed that if I'm elected president, have an opportunity to appoint someone to the courts, I'll appoint the first black woman to the courts. It's required that they have representation now. It's long overdue. Secondly, if I'm elected president, my cabinet, my administration will look like the country. And I commit that I will, in fact, I'll pick a woman to be vice president. There are a number of women who are qualified to be president tomorrow. I would pick a woman to be my vice president. Number three, I'm the guy that wrote the domestic violence law, and I'm the guy that put in the prohibitions that no one who abuses someone else should be able to own a gun. Period. They should not be able to own a gun. I would get the boyfriend exception amend it. Now I've gotten it passed that if you get a stay away order from a court, you have a child with someone, you cannot own a gun. No one should be able to own a gun who has abused a woman, period.
Mr. Vice President, if I could just follow up. Just to be clear, you just committed here tonight that your running mate, if you get the nomination, will be a woman?
Yes.
So there you go. It was live, and I was watching that debate because there wasn't a whole lot of other things to do, and I tend to watch presidential debates. Okay, because I watch them all. Let's just be honest about it. And I was watching that, and when he said those two things, it was like back to back. When he first said, "I commit to appointing a black woman to the Supreme Court," I was definitely paying attention to that. I heard that, and I thought, "Whoa, okay, that's a kind of first time we've heard that from Joe Biden, or really from any of the nominees about a particular kind of person or justice they might appoint to the Supreme Court." And then second, he followed that up with this statement about appointing a woman to be the vice presidential nominee. And I thought, wow, this is really dramatic at this moment. This is a statement that he's ready to move into the general election here. And it was kind of the moment that the nomination contest with Bernie Sanders kind of closed, when Joe Biden started to say these things. And they were both quite dramatic, and they were both also strategically and I think intellectually valuable to him. Okay. So that's March 16th. Okay. The contenders, we might kind of look like this. We're not going to get them all here. There might be one or two that we might miss that would be on your favorite list, and I intend no disrespect if that's the case. But there has been a little bit of polling data on this in terms of who's the favorites and who's out front. So this was, I showed this in my last lecture a week ago. This was a CBS News poll that came out about last Sunday, in fact, when I did the lecture. It came out in the morning. Who should Biden consider for a vice presidential candidate? And this was the poll people polled in this were Democratic registered voters, people who are registered voters and are also identified with the Democratic Party. Warren got kind of top billing, and people could pick anybody. They could pick them all. These are just who do they think should be considered for the vice presidency. So you could check a box for all of them if you wanted to, or just some of them. So you got Biden, Harris, Abrams, Klobuchar, Duckworth, Rice, Whitmer. Those were the kind of the top folks, with Warren out in front. Then a second cluster, then there's kind of Harris, and then right together Abrams and Klobuchar, and then three together of Rice, Duckworth, and Whitmer. I want to add a couple more names to this for tonight. All right, a couple more. I want to add three more folks who are not in that list, and I don't know if they were included in the poll or not. I didn't look that up, but they weren't in those numbers at least. And Michelle Lujan Grisham, who's the governor of New Mexico, Catherine Cortez Masto, who is a U.S. Senator from Nevada, and Val Demings, who is a representative in Florida. All three of them have been identified as part of the list that Joe Biden is considering. And they have also gotten some write-ups about them. And there are also people that are kind of advocating or lobbying on their behalf as well. These are the contenders that I'm going to consider tonight. So we got 7 across the top, 3 more, 10 contenders for the vice presidential candidacy. And I have to say that I feel such joy, just happiness that they're all female. Like we are so far past the time when a president should be a woman in this country. And we are so far past when a woman should be a vice president in this country. So this is progress. It's much slower than it should be, but we're here at least. And I'm very, very happy. And on this list, and I have spent a fair amount of time looking at these folks over the last several weeks, and particularly in prep for tonight's lecture, they are all amazing. They are just incredible human beings. They're patriots. They're smart. They're strong. They have been change agents. They have worked very hard to get to where they are. So I could be very, very happy with any of them. All right. Any of them. So these are the ones I want to talk about tonight. All right. I want to kind of go back to those dimensions that I talked about a week ago. What are the 4 characteristics that have traditionally been kind of weighed or put into play when presidential candidates have considered vice presidents? One is to really fix the nominee's character if there are flaws there, to fix the presidential nominee's character if there are flaws there. Fix is a little too strong because nobody can really fix someone else's character. But really, like when I mean fix here, I mean they're just trying to like rub the rough edges off, or maybe stand in as a testifier for a person, for a presidential nominee being a good person. So they're basically trying to help the presidential candidate on their character. A second criteria is to fix the nominee, the presidential nominee's governing track record. What does their track record look like? For Biden, it's a very mixed bag of things on his governing track record. So can the vice presidential nominee maybe help in terms of their own record, or at least their stated interests? Third, can the VP nominee solidify the electoral college map for the presidential nominee? Can they help to bring along some states or strengthen the likelihood of positive outcomes in certain states? So can they strengthen Joe Biden's electoral college map? And then fourthly, can they solidify the nominee's ideological worldview? By which I really mean here, kind of like, what are the core ways in which the candidate sees America in the world? What is the way in which the candidate really imagines America's position in the world? You can just take 2 examples of a Bernie Sanders and a Joe Biden, dramatically different conceptions of kind of America's position in the world and the way we might think about the United States in the world. So a fourth characteristic is, can a VP solidify the nominee's ideological worldview? These are the 4 things that have traditionally or commonly been thought of as key criteria for selecting a VP nominee. I talked about each of them last time and assessed all of the successful VP candidates from Lyndon Johnson all the way through Mike Pence on these characteristics. I want to use them tonight now to think about Joe Biden's potential candidates, potential nominees. And I'm going to focus first on Joe Biden's character and the way a VP could support possibly in that area. And then I'm going to join these 2 together because they go together. If Biden's governing track record right now might be described as fairly kind of like moderate, and also one that is definitely kind of like a very kind of America as a leading entity in the world. He really wants to, what he says, kind of make America a leader again in the world. That is connected to both a governing track record. So these 2 things really go together. How would you govern? And also, how do you see America's role in the world? So these 2 things go together. They might play differently. They might play distinctly, I should say, on the campaign trail. Like you can hit these themes differently. You can talk about governing, and then at other times you can just speak about America and our position in the world. But they really function together in a governing structure. So I'm going to consider those together as a second consideration. And then third, I want to talk about the electoral college map. I'm pretty sure that it's just a gut feeling, but my guess is that everybody who's watching this would like just to spend the entire lecture on number 3, the electoral college map, talking about which of these VP nominees might help in different areas, which might not, and so on. So we're going to hold it to third, but we will spend a fair chunk of time on it. So these lectures on the vice presidents have been lectures that I've not, never put together before. These are brand new. It's been really helpful for me to think about kind of the role that a VP plays in a presidential candidate's thinking for a campaign and for governing. And it's also introduced me to these candidates in really great ways. Some of them I had a chance to see in Iowa and South Carolina when I traveled there before the caucus in Iowa and before the primary in South Carolina. So I had a great chance to see Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders when he was still in the campaign, Amy Klobuchar. So I got that chance to see them. But the rest of the candidates, I'm learning about them, like many of you, through news coverage, through their actions, through their experiences. All right, I want to talk back to this group here. Number one is character. So I want to talk about Biden's character, first of all, okay? So the challenge for Joe Biden is that he has a history with women and he has issues around boundaries with women. This is the primary character flaw in Joe Biden's kind of personal toolbox. And this is pretty well known about Joe Biden, both of these dimensions. There have been many, many stories and images over the years of Joe Biden hugging, kind of like digging his kind of face into the hair of a woman, to getting in really close, like face to face with somebody. He often likes to do that, kind of like lean in and put the heads together. So his lack of clear boundaries with women is a well-known concern about who he is. So this is part of like what we might call his kind of character baggage. The history, though, is not just personal with him. It is also about governing, and the kind of signature moment for him that he can't shake, he'll never be able to shake, it's just going to be with him forever, is his moment as the chair of the Senate Judiciary Committee in 1991, when Dr. Anita Hill was testifying about sexual harassment by Clarence Thomas, who was being considered for the Supreme Court. Joe Biden was the ranking Democrat, and the Democrats had control of the Senate, so he was the highest ranking committee member on the Judiciary Committee. So when you're the ranking majority committee member on a Senate committee, you are running the hearings. You are keeping time for different people. You are interrupting. You are also shepherding witnesses and really behind the scenes doing a great deal to kind of shape the way the hearing unfolds. It's really a very important role. It's like being a coach or a manager of a team, that you are both the visible public person, but you're also behind the scenes. There are many moments in this testimony or in those sets of hearings where Joe Biden's record and degree of support of Anita Hill was not exemplary. It was not. He never badmouthed her or treated her badly, but he didn't stand up and advocate for her in the way he could have. There were moments where she was supposed to testify first and Clarence Thomas was going to go second, but the Republicans came to Biden and said, we'd like Thomas to go first, and he agreed to do it without really consulting with Hill's lawyers. He also could have expanded, as the chair of the Judiciary Committee, expanded the potential testimony wider to other women that were making claims about Thomas, and he refused to do so. So this is all part of his history, and over time, Anita Hill has spoken about her trauma and the disappointment that she felt there. She spoke at the University of Washington, in fact, about a year and a half ago, in a very dramatic evening. Actually, it was last fall. It was in fall of 2020. No, sorry, it was a year and a half ago, fall of 2018. She spoke there, and she has spoken publicly about forgiving or not forgiving Joe Biden. To be clear, she has said she will vote for Biden. She has said, look, I think this is, I'm going to vote for Joe Biden. But she has also made clear that she felt she was treated quite poorly. Clarence Thomas was eventually confirmed, as we know, to the Supreme Court by a 52-48 vote. Biden did not vote for Thomas. He voted against Thomas on the final vote. But this history goes with Biden forever, okay? As a quick aside, not relevant to this, but nonetheless, one of these anecdotes that I think is really notable. This is the last time that a Supreme Court justice has been confirmed by the party, by a Senate controlled by the opposing party of the president. So the Democrats had control of the Senate, and they confirmed Clarence Thomas, even though George H.W. Bush, the Republican, was president. And we have not had that crossover where there's been a president of one party and had their Supreme Court justices confirmed by a Senate controlled by the opposing party since then. And of course, we had Mitch McConnell refusing to consider Merrick Garland in 2016. I'm not sure that we're going to see another Supreme Court nominee confirmed by an opposing party in my lifetime, which makes it all the more important for, if the Democrats are going to win the presidency, if that's a goal, to also try to win the Senate. It's just so very important. But back to this story. This history goes with Biden wherever he goes. Last year, in 2019, Lucy Flores, who is a Nevada legislator, wrote a story about getting kissed by Joe Biden on the back of her neck when he was introducing her at an event. They were going to go out. She was going to speak. He was behind her, kind of gave her a hug. Didn't do anything specifically sexual, but he clearly invaded her boundaries and her privacy and gave her a kiss. And this was deeply, deeply uncomfortable and totally unacceptable by Biden to do this. Biden didn't deny this. All right. This story got a lot of play. It was in something called The Cut, which is a really kind of progressive new blog that's out there, has had a lot of pieces in it. And after this, Joe Biden did a video. A couple days later, Joe Biden released a video where he basically said, I'm sorry, and I've made mistakes, but this is who I am. I'm a person who likes to hug and to get close to people, and I will do better. I will do better. I understand, as he said, the social norms have changed. I will be more mindful about respecting people's space in the future. That's my responsibility, and I will meet it. Okay? He delivered this. So this was back in 2019. All right. There have been still these many stories of him doing things like that. Again, never sexual assault or overly sexual, these stories at least, but many, many invasive, unacceptable invasions of people's privacy. And then we get to Tara Reade, who tells her story about a month ago now, bringing out the concerns that she had and the claims that she was making about Joe Biden's treatment of her, what she argues as sexual harassment and then sexual assault when she worked in his office in 1993. She made these allegations recently. Biden then eventually spoke out and said that he denied them. He unequivocally denied them, that they never happened. And, in the amount of time since then, there's been a lot of reporting and a lot of discussion and analysis. And there's no way for any of us to know whether it did exactly happen or not happen. But there certainly has been a number of instances about the story that have raised questions. And there have been many, many women who've worked for Biden since then, or in his career, who have spoken out about never seeing anything like this. Okay. Nonetheless, polls showed about a third of Americans had heard a fair bit about Tara Reade's story, and about another 20% had been hearing at least a little bit. So it is definitely something that the public is aware of and that they have heard. So he's got these issues with women that are part of the story. Like he fairly or unfairly, he has built this kind of this idea, this kind of world, this perspective of him. Okay. So I want to list all of the nominees or the potential VP nominees. And what I'm going to do is build a little table over time here. I want to kind of examine whether the potential nominees would help Joe Biden on each of the key dimensions that I laid out, the key criteria that I laid out. And the first one is character. Would these nominees help Joe Biden on this issue around history and boundaries with women? Well, the single best thing Joe Biden could have in terms of helping him on his character, on this particular character challenge that he has, is to nominate a woman as his vice presidential candidate, and a woman who definitively testifies and stands by him and says, look, I trust this guy totally. I have seen him. I know him. I believe in him. He's a top-notch human being. So That's the single best thing he could have. It's better than his wife saying this. It's better than daughters saying this. It's better than any men saying this for sure. It'd be a vice presidential candidate who would put her career on the line to stand with Biden on this. Well, in this particular instance, all of these nominees qualify for this because they're going to, they're all women to begin with. And if they do accept it, they are going to be they're going to be sane with their behaviors, that they believe this guy and they stand with them. So I want to kind of make a list as we go across in the different columns, the different criteria I want to think about. So on character, and the little plus means, do they add something positive? Can they help Joe Biden? So are they going to, is it a positive for Joe Biden if these people, if this particular individual, Stacey Abrams, Val Demings, Amy Klobuchar, is it a positive for Joe Biden on the character front if they became his nominee as vice president? In this case, the answer is yes for all of them. Okay, any one of them achieves exactly what Joe Biden needs for a character reference on his biggest character challenge. All right. They all do. They all definitively do this for him. So if you're looking for differentiation among the candidates on the criteria, this is not where we're going to find it. But I want to stop for a second here. I'm going to come off of the screen sharing and just talk for a second. So Joe Biden made that statement, that declaration on March 16th that he was going to nominate a woman for the vice presidency, for his nominee. Tara Reade's allegation comes out on March, a little bit like about a week and a half later. So had Joe Biden not said that on March 16th, and then later, let's say a month later, says this, if he'd have waited, for example, to like when Bernie was officially done with the campaign or anything like that, if Biden had done that, then he would be in a very different position in choosing a female vice presidential candidate. It would be seen as he's trying to essentially use a vice presidential candidate, a female, to his political benefit. And that might not be any of the calculus for him, but it would nonetheless be part of the storyline. It would be there. Now, he may have been thinking, and the campaign may well have been thinking about all of that, about Tara Reade's potential story coming out, or anything else that could ever come out, possibly, about him and women. And that they sought to get this position that he was going to nominate a woman out there before that. Because I think it's also interesting that he said he's going to nominate a woman to the Supreme Court, a black woman to the Supreme Court. So he got both of those out together in one answer in a debate. Whether he did it to get out in front of the possibility of this, or it was definitively something he was already going to do on both fronts for the Supreme Court and for the VP, is an unanswerable question for me. It's an answerable question for Biden and for the campaign, but ultimately it hasn't become a story at all. It's just been not a story at all. Like, is he somehow hiding behind the potential of a female vice presidential candidate? So strategically, whether he intended it or not, it has certainly been beneficial to him to have declared that he was going to have a VP candidate who is a woman, so that he gets the benefit of the character reference without being seen as somehow kind of moving a chess piece on the chessboard to his advantage. It's really a definitive kind of difference. And it's one of those moments that in history really makes a profound distinction about how this selection will be seen for Joe Biden, how Joe Biden, if he becomes the president, will be seen, and how the person who gets selected will be seen. The difference between being selected and named as having a woman before Tara Reade allegations come out or after that. I feel glad for the way that this unfolded, whether it was strategic or just happenstance. Okay. Item 2 on that list is the kind of governing worldview. I put these two together kind of like to fix the governing record of the nominee, in this case Biden, or to and to connect it to the kind of broader worldview of the way that the nominee, the presidential nominee, sees America in the kind of scope of nation relationships. All right. So the governing worldview. All right. Here's Biden's challenge in this case. He will be, if he's elected, the oldest president in American history. He will be. He's 77 right now. He will be 78 when the election occurs, or when he would take office, I should say. And his policies are also seen as, or they have been seen as, fairly traditional and 20th century, not really up to the kind of boldness that a very diversifying America, a technologically complicated America, an economically transforming America might look like. All right. This is his challenge, that he is legitimately would be the oldest president, and also his policies, whether on criminal justice, on climate change, even a little bit on healthcare, take immigration, have been seen as not as modern or as progressive or as up to date that a number of Democrats and some independents would like to see. This is his challenge. Okay. On the first front, the oldest, this is already a point of critique from the Trump campaign. Donald Trump has named Joe Biden Sleepy Joe, and this is an attempt to play upon Joe Biden's age. He's also made many comments about the mental kind of acuity of the cognitive abilities of Joe Biden. This was on March 2nd, right after Super Tuesday, where Trump tweets out, "Wow, Sleepy Joe doesn't know where he is or what he's doing." Honestly, I don't even think he knows what office he's running for. This is Trump's line of argument. He actually launched this line of argument back when Biden entered into the campaign back in 2019. Trump has been hitting on this idea for quite some time. The idea that Biden is old, he's failing mentally, and that he's lost, he's confused. All right. Well, there's been a really strong internal debate in the White House, in the Trump White House, about how hard they want to go after Joe Biden on his age. It's been a back and forth kind of argument about whether or not they should go after Biden on this, given that Trump himself is in his 70s and certainly is not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So they've been having a long discussion about this, but ultimately they have decided that they are going to go after Biden on his supposed mental challenges that he has. And so this is a headline just a couple of days ago in The Hill, which covers Capitol Hill. Trump campaign launches ads questioning Biden's age and fitness, physical fitness and mental fitness. All right. And here's a tweet by Will Staken, who's pretty popular in progressive circles. The new Trump Facebook ads go hard at Biden over his age. Too old and out of it. One ad mockingly depicts Biden in what looks like a nursing home needing to be fed. Okay. So here you got these ads. So on the oldest pres bit, the Trump administration or the Trump campaign has decided they are going to go after Joe Biden and make the case that he is losing it mentally. Okay. This is a decision that they've made. And as part of thinking about this, I've been in prep for this lecture. I've read a number of things. I've been watching, listening to some podcasts. And so I want to play a clip from Pod Save America, a very popular podcast among progressives or Democrats. It's the podcast hosts are a couple guys. There are 3 or 4 guys who all worked in the Obama White House, the Obama administration, on the Obama campaigns. And here they are a couple weeks ago talking about the Trump administration's decision to go hard and strong at Joe Biden's age. And there's humor in what they have to say here, because this is what their podcast is. It's funny. It's a little raw. Okay. And I'm just going to play it from my phone because it's just audio. That's all it is. I'm going to play it from my phone and I'll hold it up to the microphone. It's about a 2-minute clip, and they're just talking with at a pretty fast-paced clip about the Trump campaign making a decision that they're going to go after Joe Biden on mental fitness and kind of mental acuity.
Yeah, good advice. All right, so we are now less than 6 months out from Election Day. I want to talk about the challenges that both campaigns are facing. Let's start with the Trump campaign. There was a Washington Post story over the weekend that the Trump folks are still struggling to find a message now that we're headed towards depression levels of unemployment. And their own internal Republican National Committee polling shows the president trailing Joe Biden in the battleground states 45 to 48%. Trump's strategist told the Post that their only shot at winning is driving up Biden's unfavorable numbers, but they're also divided over just how to do that. Tommy, what are they struggling with here? What's the internal debate?
The debate is basically, do we use a bazooka or a flamethrower to scorch the earth? I mean, they know, like, that's their only path to victory is destroying Joe Biden. They want to drive down enthusiasm among Democrats, among young people, among suburban women, and the question is how. And the Washington Post reported that some people in the campaign, like Brad Parscale, the campaign manager, essentially want to say Joe Biden is senile. And it seems like Donald Trump himself is on board with that strategy because he is calling him Sleepy Joe. He constantly suggests that Biden doesn't write his own statements or tweets. They talk about him hiding, blah, blah, blah. The Washington Post reported that Kellyanne Conway in particular is worried that Trump is already losing ground with seniors, and they worry that mocking Biden's age could exacerbate that problem. I would respectfully suggest to Kellyanne that the bigger problem with seniors that they might have is rushing to reopen the economy and thus maybe killing them. I would deal with that first. But, they're also debating the strategy about whether to call Biden soft on China, and, the super PACs and others have put big money behind that. And so we'll see if it will work. It seems like a bit more of a bank shot to me. So whatever they're going to do, it's going to be pretty gross. I mean, just an aside here, there are a lot of folks on the left, including in the progressive media, who were circulating edited videos and just asserting that Joe Biden was in cognitive decline. And I would just congratulate all of them for helping lay the groundwork for these attacks, even though we've still seen no evidence that Joe Biden is in cognitive decline in any way. And reportedly, when he jumped on the phone with Donald Trump, Trump remarked to his own team, that guy didn't seem senile at all. So, great work, everybody.
Yeah. Trump was like, maybe Twitter isn't real life. No, I mean, I think that raising mental fitness in a race against Donald Trump for president is quite a strategy.
Yeah. The last point there, he's saying raising mental fitness by the Trump administration when they're defending Trump is quite a strategy. Not a good one, is the point that he's making there. So they have decided that they're going to go after Joe Biden's mental fitness. They have also decided they're going to go after Joe Biden on China. All right. China's a more complicated thing for so many reasons for Trump. The more in his wheelhouse is this claim about Biden's mental fitness. This is more the way that Trump likes to operate. It's more in the kind of a personal set of vindictive comments that he loves to make about opponents, whether it's back to Lion Ted Cruz or little Marco Rubio or low energy Jeb. Okay, this is just in his wheelhouse. Several of you have asked, like, is this going to be a concern for Joe Biden's campaign? I don't see it as a concern one bit. The reality is that Joe Biden's will he's not ever been seen as necessarily a Rhodes Scholar. That's not his character claim. He's not claimed to be brilliant. He's always just claimed to be a good person. That's why the character concern about women is like ideally addressed by having a woman VP nominee. But the idea that like he might be in some kind of mental decline, A, isn't true, and B, the reality is that it's just not on point with a major strength of Biden. Okay. The issue of too old policies, though, when we talk about a governing worldview, that's a bigger challenge for Joe Biden. It is true that his policies over time have not been the boldest ever. They have been remarkably effective sometimes, but they have never been the boldest. And in this time of coronavirus meltdown in our country, and looking at where we as a society are going to go, that lack of boldness is a challenge for Joe Biden. So they've been taking steps to address this in a number of ways. So I want to just identify two particular things that Joe Biden has done to point out that he is his himself and his policies are really just a stepping stone to a different, brighter, bolder future. First of all, he's claiming himself as a bridge from Obama to the next president. He is saying that he is a rest stop, a way station along the way to the next generation of leadership. And that's a pretty humbling thing for somebody to say if they're wanting to be president. That's not too often what you see coming from a president. But what he gets in saying this is that, hey, don't worry about my age. And also, even if you don't love my policies, the reality is that I'm just a step towards the next better place. And so he said this not long ago in Detroit on what was the last in-person rally of the campaign by the Biden campaign. He said, look, I view myself as a bridge and not as anything else. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw standing behind me. They are the future of this country. That's middle sentence. There's an entire generation of leaders you saw standing behind me. He's referring to the three candidates who endorsed him and stood with him on stage in Michigan that night, March 9th. And that's Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Michigan Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Those are the three that were standing on stage with him when he said this, and that's who he's referencing behind him. All right. So this is one way that he's dealing with this concern that people might have that A, he's too old, or B, that his policies are old. And the second way he's dealing with it is that he's actually going out of his way to embrace bolder policies. It is almost always the case that nominees for president win their party's nomination, and then they what's called tack to the center, or they move to the center politically. So they run more liberal if you're a Democrat, or more conservative if you're a Republican during the primary to win the base of the parties, and then you move to the center in the election. Biden is reversing that. All right. Biden has already been running as a center left moderate, and he is running now more towards progressive left. All right. So he very quickly, after Elizabeth Warren dropped out, endorsed the Elizabeth Warren bankruptcy plan for student loan relief. This is important because this is a complete reversal of Joe Biden's position on this. They had many disagreements about bankruptcy before, and Biden had not been endorsing the student loan relief plan of Warren, and he flipped and said, I will. This is a good idea. I want to. This is him embracing some bolder policies. He has built an alliance with Bernie Sanders around a series of policy task forces. And everything I'm reading suggests that Sanders and Biden, them personally, and their strategists are finding tremendous working relationship. They're getting along very well. This is nothing but positive for the Biden campaign. Joe Biden says criminal justice reform is going to be an enormous focus of his administration. This is going some distance to addressing concerns about his past positions on crime bills. He invited and asked and then got a yes from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez to work with him on climate change. This is like a 1-2 punch because she is a progressive person on climate change, but she's also a rock star hero to many younger voters, as well as many Latino voters, Latinx voters in the society. So he's getting both the policies and kind of a strong endorsement here. And then I want to finish with this. This came out today, a tweet today from a New York Times reporter, Alex Burns. And this is really a remarkable thing. Okay. Burns this morning tweeted, my story today is that Dems had just settled on a 2020 message about center-left policies and a return to normalcy when COVID made that plan obsolete. Now, Biden is promising FDR scale changes. And Democrats from Warner, as in Mark Warner, the Virginia Senator, to Elizabeth Warren say the moment demands deep economic reform. And here's a quote from Mark Warner, who is absolutely one of the most moderate members of the Democratic caucus in the Senate. There is a recognition that this event is more transformative than 2008, more transformative than 9/11, more transformative than the fall of the Berlin Wall, says Senator Mark Warren of Virginia, a centrist Democrat. I think that we actually are in a position where Joe Biden may turn out to be an extremely progressive president. And if you want him to do that, then you can play a role in pushing him that way. All right. He is someone who listens very well. And he is certainly trying to build these connections, all because he's trying to overcome this perceived older person and older worldview. All right. All right, then let's bring it back to the vice presidential candidates and whether or not they can help him on this. All right. So here's the first thing we talked about. Could they help him on character? And I said, yep, they all can. Like, this is part of the genius of having a female vice presidential candidate. Second characteristic, can they help him on his governing worldview? Can they be a net positive to him on his governing worldview? Here, I'm not going to put X's everywhere. All right. I'm going to put up the ones that I think are yeses for this. And then I'll just briefly run through why I think they're yeses. Okay. Stacey Abrams is bold on issues of criminal justice reform, voting reform, economic reform. She's quite moderate on a series of other things, healthcare, immigration, and other factors. But she would bring a certain kind of governing boldness that comes with a progressive Southern perspective. If you're a progressive in the South, you have thought a lot about how it is that you can get shit done in a progressive way. All right. She would bring that. Cortez Masto, pretty moderate in the middle. Val Demings, very much a moderate. Tammy Duckworth, very much a moderate. Kamala Harris, a moderate. Amy Klobuchar, moderate. Michelle Lujan Grisham, the governor of New Mexico. Now, she's very progressive. She has actually been one of the national leaders in fighting for kind of immigration reform and treatment of dreamers in a very effective, honest, careful way with integrity. She has also been very vocal and outspoken about pro-choice and women's rights. So she's very interesting on this. Not well known on either coast, but very well known in the Southwest in this country. Susan Rice, definitely moderate, was National Security Advisor in the Obama administration. Elizabeth Warren, well, this is her home run moment right here. For Warren, this is the biggest thing she can bring to the ticket, is her plans and her boldness and her ability to see down the road. She has been doing this for many years in the Democratic caucus, and this is her greatest kind of differentiating place on the board for a VP nominee, would be how much she could help on governing. Gretchen Whitmer, very much middle of the road. None of these folks, when I say middle of the road, are like center right. They're all center left, but they're not bold kind of progressives in a way that Biden could distinguish himself in new ways on this. And Biden's not going to go far. He's not going to go for Medicare for all. He's not going to wipe out all student loan debt. He's not going to do that. But he can go like halfway to some of this stuff. And Abrams, Lujan Grisham, and Warren get him there through their selections if they were to be selected. All right. All right. The Electoral College map. So the Electoral College map is kind of, I look at the Electoral College map the same way that when I was younger, I used to look at the standings in baseball or football or basketball. It is the kind of the board on which all presidential decisions in a campaign must be calibrated to. If you cannot govern until you get elected. So you must first get elected. So the reality is that the Electoral College is the way you get elected as president and vice president in the United States. So when you put up the Electoral College map and you start to look at it, there are many different ways to get to 270 votes, which is what you need in the Electoral College. There are many different paths to get there. And so you can begin to play kind of different pathways to getting to 270. I think about this a lot. It certainly informs where I and colleagues in Common Purpose think about targeting our resources in the states that we focus on. And it plays an enormous role in where campaigns and state and national parties and super PACs devote their resources. The reality is that Washington State is not considered a competitive presidential state. So we do not see the kind of advertising. We do not see the visits by candidates. We do not see the on the ground turnout operations that have traditionally been present in campaigns. If we were in an Ohio or a Florida or a Michigan or a Pennsylvania, the world politically would be a completely different animal, and we would be inundated by all of these things because candidates and campaigns and super PACs have devoted so many resources to the key states. So I want to talk about them in the Electoral College. Again, this all comes out of the Constitution, and I've talked about this in other lectures. The Electoral College is built into the U.S. Constitution. It assured that there would be, back at the founding of the nation, that there would be both a mix of northern and southern states, that a candidate would not be able to win the presidency just through the popular vote of a larger population in the north. It also was tied to representation in the House of Representatives, and that took into account the size of the populations in each state, as well as the enslaved population in the South. It's really woven into the fabric of this country. It is possible that we may change this. You could adopt a constitutional amendment, or alternatively, you can get enough states to agree to vote to send their popular votes in favor of the candidate who wins the national popular vote. And that initiative, that body of work to try to get that to happen, to get states to bound together to devote their state's Electoral College votes towards the winner of the national popular vote, is slowly making progress in this country. So that could happen. But for now, the Electoral College continues to be the puzzle, the chessboard to get us to 270 to the presidency. Okay. So I want to talk about the Electoral College map then. Here's what Biden needs. Here's the challenges that Biden has. He needs people of color. That's what POC stands for, people of color. He needs women, and he needs young people. He needs all of them. He does not need all of them equally to win the White House. All right. I have ranked them in essentially kind of the order that he needs to win the White House. He needs people of color. He needs women, and he needs young people. The first two are pretty close together and are much more important than needing young people. However, young people can be the difference between narrowly winning the White House and winning the White House by a fair degree and bringing some U.S. senators along with you. Okay. The Joe Biden challenge. He needs people of color. He needs women. He needs youth. Okay. He's being pushed hard on Black women in particular. Here's a letter, an open letter by a whole number of signatories, people who signed it back in late April, to Joe Biden. We congratulate you as the Democratic presumptive nominee for President of the United States. We are encouraged, heartened, and inspired by your commitment to select a woman as your vice presidential running mate. To that end, we, the undersigned Black women leaders from a variety of backgrounds and experiences, from both the public and the private sectors, who have all, time and time again, supported the Democratic Party nationally and across the country, are writing to recommend and encourage you to recognize and seize this moment in our country's history and its bold future by selecting a Black woman to serve as your vice presidential running mate. Each of the Black women who have been discussed publicly, including leader Stacey Abrams, she was the minority leader in the Georgia House of Representatives, and they those officials usually carry the word leader, including Leader Stacey Abrams, Congresswoman Karen Bass, Congresswoman Val Demings, Congresswoman Marcia Fudge, Senator Kamala Harris, Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, who's the Atlanta mayor, and Ambassador Susan Rice would bring enthusiasm, strength, authority, credibility, organization, integrity, foresight, reliability, trust, and honor to the Democratic ticket. Every one of these women is already leading in the roles they presently occupy and in the leadership positions they have previously held from the local, state, and federal levels, including domestic and foreign policy. They have the experience, qualifications, and principled core values of a true leader that would make for the right partner to help catapult the Democrats to victory in November. Every one of these women has the skills, competence, and knowledge required of an effective governing partner who will help you lead America in this unprecedented moment in our history. Further, it is a fact that the road to the White House is powered by Black women, and Black women are the key to a Democratic victory in 2020. Black women are not only the most loyal voters to the Democratic Party, we are key to igniting Black voters across all demographics to show up in record numbers. There has not been a Democratic presidential nominee in over 40 years that has won the White House without Black women's leadership and vote, including President Barack Obama, President Bill Clinton, and President Jimmy Carter. Therefore, we urge you to seize this historic opportunity to choose a Black woman running mate who will fight for the issues that matter most to the American people and help deliver a decisive victory and a successful Biden presidency. There is a chorus, not always singing the same song exactly, but of voices making the case to the Biden campaign that he should select an African-American woman to be his nominee. It's clear, it's very true that Joe Biden would not be the nominee without the support of Black voters and particularly African-American women. That is historically completely true. All right. And they're saying now, look, we're here. We are here for you. We've been here for you. And we are asking you to respond in kind with an act of leadership by bringing forward somebody from this group of people. All right. Biden is getting pushed on this. There has been no pushback from the Biden campaign publicly on this. It's a careful dance. There'd be no value to Joe Biden or his candidate's campaign saying, hey, like, just back off. They have received this all. They have heard it. There have been a number of moments where they have publicly said, hey, look, we totally hear you. And we have a number of women that we're considering who fall into that category. So they so far are handling this push, this very strong push, very effectively. Eventually, though, we're going to get to a decision. And when we get to that decision, well, we'll just see what happens. Okay. All right. So let's get to the map, the path to 270. This slide right here is taken from a webinar, an online webinar, not a Zoom webinar, but an online webinar done today by the Biden campaign. It was run by the campaign manager, Jennifer O'Malley Dillon. And she is the campaign manager for Joe Biden. And they use this slide to talk about the map. The dark blue states are the states that the Democrats have won recently and have historically won and that they want to hold. The Minnesota, the Virginia, the Colorado, and the Nevada. The win back states are states that they've often won but did not win in 2016. Iowa, Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Florida. And then expanding are the gray kind of purple, the gray kind of pinkish states where they think that they can win this time around, in Georgia, in Texas, and in Arizona. This is the map that they're looking at. As we look at this map, the holds, the win backs, and the potential expansions, I want to draw our attention to three clusters geographically. The first is the Southwest. This is a domain over here where you've got Nevada and Colorado have moved decidedly blue. Arizona looks to be moving towards blue, at least purple for sure. And Texas, well, we don't know exactly where Texas is. I did a series of lectures, a couple lectures on how Joe Biden can win. And he does seem to be doing pretty well in Arizona and darn neck and neck in Texas. Well, if the Democrats were to win Texas, it's game over. All right. Texas is the largest electoral college state for the Republicans. So to lose that would be like the equivalent of the Democrats losing California. All right. So this is one region of potential focus on the map. A second region of focus on the map is the Midwest. You can go from west to east, from Minnesota through the Great Lakes states over to Pennsylvania. And these are states that the Democrats lost most of them in 2016. And they have historically won a number of them, including in the Obama-Biden campaigns. All right. And then the third cluster is down here in the Southeast, from Virginia, which has become a reliably blue state now, to North Carolina, which went for Obama-Biden in 2008, Florida, which went for Obama-Biden in 8 and 12, and Georgia, which is getting closer and closer. And several polls have suggested that Joe Biden is running quite competitively in that state. These are three areas. And when you slice and dice the vice presidential candidates in terms of their contributions to the electoral map, when you position them, they contribute to these different kind of oval rings. All right. So I want to talk about them with that in mind. All right. So we go back over here. Here's their kind of two things I've already talked about. They all would contribute in a positive way to Joe Biden on issues of character. And a few of them could really help him on governing and kind of overcoming this sense of him being older and older policies. So let's add in the electoral college map next. And I'm going to put up a whole bunch of folks here. There's going to be a lot of X's here because they can help in different ways. And then I want a quick run through them. All right. Yep. Almost all of them can help in some definitive way on the electoral college. And this is part of the reason they're on this list. All right. Because they meet that threshold. They first are all women. So that's the far left column. But then the map, you don't get to govern unless you win the electoral college. So they're very important. Where could Stacey Abrams help? Stacey Abrams would definitely help in the Southeast and in the upper Midwest. The kind of excitement she would bring among younger voters and people of color in a Detroit, in a Philadelphia, in a Columbus, in a Milwaukee, as well as down in an Atlanta, a Tampa, a Miami, and so on. Cortez Masto would absolutely help in the Southwest and in Florida. She would help in Texas, in Nevada for sure, in Colorado, in Arizona, and in Florida, and a little bit in Georgia. She is the first Latina elected to the U.S. Senate in U.S. history. So the first Latinx woman. And so for her to be named the VP candidate, even though she doesn't have a huge national profile, would be very, very notable. And if the Dems could win in some of those states that I just mentioned, the Arizona, the Texas, or the Florida, that is game, set, and match for the Electoral College. Val Demings is from Florida. She's a representative. She works on the I-5 corridor right outside of Tampa. That's her congressional district. She was a police chief. Her husband is a very well-known sheriff down there. They are a powerful couple and well-known in Florida, very well respected in kind of Florida and in American politics. She has a credible story. Her parents were a janitor and a maid, and she's raised herself up, and she talks very vigorously about the American dream. She would be a tremendous contributor in the state of Florida, and that alone might be enough to flip the Electoral College. In addition to that, as an African-American woman, as somebody who hails distinctly from the African-American tradition and legacy, she would also matter in states where there are larger Black populations, such as the upper Midwest states, as well as a Virginia and a North Carolina. Tammy Duckworth is a senator in Illinois. She's an incredible human being, a two-time double amputee, a military veteran, first woman to give birth while an elected senator, first woman to have a child. She is a remarkably inspiring person but she's in Illinois and she doesn't have a huge profile outside of Illinois. Is already a very strong blue state. So that's why I don't have her down as an X, as really contributing significantly to the Electoral College map. Kamala Harris would certainly energize African-American voters in the South and in the upper Midwest. She would certainly do kind of what Abrams would do, and she has a very large national profile. Amy Klobuchar, well, her home is the upper Midwest, Minnesota. She would strengthen Biden in Minnesota and Wisconsin and Iowa, in Michigan and Ohio, Pennsylvania. That's her home run territory. And in many elections, she would be, I think, she would be the front runner because of the importance of that region for the state, for the Electoral College. Lujan Grisham would be absolutely strong in the Southwest. She's the governor of New Mexico. She would be strong in Nevada, Colorado, Arizona, in Texas, and again in Florida, just like Cortez Masto. Also, her husband died from cancer in 2004. So she has this incredible resilience story that she talks about of deciding to run for office and then becoming governor. She's the first Latina Democrat to be elected governor in this country. So remarkable. Susan Rice, former ambassador to the United Nations, a national security advisor for the Obama and Biden administration, would bring great gravitas internationally. African-American woman. She also is probably out of all of these folks, the most straight, tell it like it is, no bullshit kind of set of comments. I've seen her a number of times get asked questions about Trump where she just lays it out even stronger than Stacey Abrams does. And so I think Susan Rice would be a very energizing force in the upper Midwest as well as in the South. Elizabeth Warren would not bring, it wouldn't matter for Massachusetts, but her ability to energize women and youth, I think, would make a difference in particularly in younger states, in a Texas, in an Arizona, in a Georgia, in a North Carolina, in a Virginia, not as much in the Midwest, all right, but I think in some of those areas that she would do well. She also is actually picked in a recent poll by CBS News. There were some other questions in that CBS News poll that I didn't dive into, but she has the strongest support across racial groups. She's above 70% wanting to be more than 70% of white women and more than 70% of black women, more than 70% of white voters and more than 70% of black voters both picked Elizabeth Warren as somebody who should be considered. She's the only one of all of these potential contenders who got over 70% among both of those racial groups. So she brings strong support among African Americans. She brings the strongest support among African Americans for any of the white candidates. And then Gretchen Whitmer, of course, is the governor of Michigan, very popular, won by 600,000 votes in 2018 as governor, has taken on Trump, has stood strong. She's raised in a lineage of really tough legislators in that state. Her father was famous for being kind of a Michigan powerhouse, and she is an absolute take no prisoners, give and take kind of politician. I think she would help in Michigan. She would help in the upper Midwest. So there's so much value here. You can see why these folks are on Biden's list. There isn't anybody here who doesn't bring something valuable. And of all of these I've mentioned, you can legitimately make the case that they strengthen the Electoral College map in the ways that I've mentioned. There might be variance there. It's possible that Abrams and Harris do this more powerfully than Cortez Masto and Lujan Grisham do, but I'm not sure on that. I just don't know. And Val Demings, her stock is rising, and she's very interesting, but she's in the House of Representatives, so she doesn't have the national profile. But yet she's in Florida, this crucial state. I mean, there's just a lot here. There's a lot to weigh and to consider. Okay, I want to consider one more characteristic then. It's not a traditionally considered vice presidential candidate characteristic, but it's one that has to be taken into account, given the importance of federal judges, the Supreme Court, and the ability to get any legislation through Congress. If the Democrats want to get anything done, they need to win the presidency and they need to win the Senate while still holding the House. So any decision that Joe Biden needs to make has to take into account whether or not selecting one of these candidates, one of these nominees, would hurt the Democrats in the US Senate. All right. So when you look at this list over here, some of them are not in the Senate. So they're going to be absolute yes, they would not hurt in the Senate at all. And then some are in the Senate and they wouldn't hurt because they are in states where there's a Democratic governor who would appoint their replacement. But there's some who are in states where there's a Democratic governor who would appoint the replacement, but they're swing states. And so there's no guarantee that a Democrat running in their seat would be a strong likelihood to hold the seat in the future. All right. So I'm going to put the X's on the names here that would be the most beneficial for the Dems winning the Senate. So if there's no X here, it's because they run some risk to hurting the Democrats in the Senate. Okay. So Stacey Abrams, she's not in office. In fact, one of her great weaknesses is she's never won office above the kind of the House of Representatives in the state. She's not in the Senate, so she doesn't hurt the Democrats in terms of the Senate at all. Cortez Masto actually is a risk. She is up for re-election in 2022. She would be replaced by a Democratic governor, Steve Sisolak, right now, but Nevada is a definite swing state, so there's no guarantee the Dems would hold her seat in 2022. Val Demings is in the House of Representatives, so she's not a risk for the Senate at all. So right now, Abrams and Demings, no harm. They're beneficial for the Senate. Cortez Masto, not devastating because she's replaced by a Democrat, by the Democratic governor, but her seat, no guarantee it stays in the Democratic column in 2022. Tammy Duckworth, she's in Illinois. Well, a the Republican won the Illinois Senate seat in 2012. 2010, a Republican did. And there's no guarantee in that state in a low turnout midterm election in 2022 that Duckworth's seat would stay. So I'm not going to put Duckworth as an X on this. Harris is a definite X because she's in a very safe Democratic state, California. So she'd be replaced by Democratic governor. And it's an almost certainty that she would win, that whoever replaced her would hold the Senate seat when that election would come up again. All right. So it's not a swing state where you worry about losing the Senate seat. Amy Klobuchar, well, she's in Minnesota and she has won big in her campaigns. And it's a state that traditionally is Democratic. However, she would be up in 2022. And so her replacement would run in 2022. And that's not a guarantee in that state in 2022 if there's a Democratic president and a Democratic Senate. That could be a tough seat to hold. So Klobuchar, I can't give her an X. I can't say for sure that picking her helps in the Senate. It could hurt. Lujan Grisham, she's not in the Senate. She's a governor. She would be replaced by a Democratic lieutenant governor. So no negative impact on the Senate. All right. Susan Rice, also not in the Senate. She's not in any elected office right now. She's like Abrams. So she would be no damage to the Senate at all. Elizabeth Warren is complicated. Warren is in Massachusetts, which is a strong, like California, blue state. But in 2009, in a special election in that state, the reality is that in 2010, in a special election in that state, the Republican Scott Brown did win a Senate seat there. Elizabeth Warren eventually beats Scott Brown in 2016. Beats him in 2012 when Brown had to run for the full next term because he had been replacing the end of Ted Kennedy's seat after Kennedy had passed away. Warren beats him in 2012, but Brown wins that seat and holds it for 2 years. So Massachusetts is not a guarantee. If Warren leaves her seat, then she is replaced by a Republican governor, which is likely to be a Republican appointment, but not guaranteed because he's a very moderate Republican, Charlie Baker. But let's assume that she would be replaced by a Republican senator. That's not good. But it wouldn't be very long after that where the Democrats there would be a special election for a permanent new senator. And it's likely the Democrats would have a great shot to win that, but not a guarantee in a special election, not a guarantee. There is one very strong way, though, that Warren could help to hold that seat if she were selected as the VP nominee. Under the rules of replacement senators in Massachusetts, if Warren were to be nominated as the VP by June 23rd of this year and to resign her Senate seat by then her Senate seat would be unfilled and would be up for a special election on election day this year. All right. June 23rd is a certain number of dates in advance of the primary election. And so this is the way the rules are written for the state, that the next general election would be when there'd be a special election. So the Dems would be very favored to hold that Senate seat in that fall election. And my God, you know what would happen if she were to do that? I think Ayanna Pressley would run for that seat. And what an incredible candidate she would be for the U.S. Senate. So this would require her to be selected before then and to resign her Senate seat before June 23rd, but it could be done. It could be done. But I'm not going to put an X there for Warren. Whitmer is a governor. She's obviously not a senator, would be replaced by a Democratic lieutenant governor. So Whitmer would not damage the Senate for the Democrats. So this is the kind of set of calculations and considerations that we might take into account in thinking about a vice presidential selection by Joe Biden. All of them are women and help him on character. A few of them would really help him on governing. Most of them would help him in really tangible ways, in theory at least, in the Electoral College. And then some of them would present risks for the U.S. Senate and the Democratic control of that, and others would not be a risk at all. All right. So as you look across them, you see 4 for Abrams and you see 4 for Lujan Grisham, right? But the intangible that I can't put on the map or on this list or on this table, because I don't have any access to Joe Biden's mind, is his sense of comfort with these individuals. He had 8 years of experience with Barack Obama, in which Obama selected him because he believed that Biden would bring a certain governing experience, that column 2, a certain governing experience that would be very valuable. But he was also selected, Obama did, because he was very comfortable with Joe Biden. They got along. They had a very genuine friendship and rapport. And Joe Biden is huge, huge, huge on issues of relationships, loyalty, trust. That's like core to who he is. It's built into his the way he talks about the world and the way he talks about himself and friends of his. So there is this dimension that we cannot calibrate at all, which is kind of trust and confidence that Joe Biden has in these nominees. Okay. So I'm going to end. These are the folks that I've been talking about for this lecture. Those 10 potential selections. And I want to kind of finish. I want to finish by making some, statements and maybe a little bit of guesses around the candidates here, the ones here. All right. As a first step, I want to play another clip from Pod Save America from the same episode. The episode was titled Veep Stakes, like VP Stakes. And I want to jump towards the end of their segment on the vice presidents when they're talking about some of these candidates and dreaming about them. Okay. They're kind of dreaming about them.
It's a fun hypothetical. It's a real slider situation. And I say we jump through.
Okay, so I'm going to play this. I'm going to hold it up to the microphone here. They're talking about the candidates and the way in which the Biden campaign will go about selecting somebody. And then they kind of go off into dreamland thinking about it.
Until there are dinosaurs.
I mean, people going through the process and candidates always say this, but I think it is true and it'll be true this time. You should pick the person that you feel most comfortable with, the person who you believe can step into the role of president. And it usually will come down to that, though we're also facing an election where it's more important than ever before to win, right? Like winning is going to be a huge consideration. So I think what the Biden campaign will obviously do is forget just about these Democratic voter polls, go into these swing states, start polling Biden and some of these nominees. And just to make sure, like say Biden likes someone, all right, make sure that nominee, that potential VP nominee doesn't lose you any voters, doesn't make things worse, right? If she doesn't, if it either makes no difference or it makes a positive difference, then you pick who you like, right? You pick who you believe in, and you pick who's going to be the best president. I think that's pretty clear. But I am sure they will do a ton of polling. You know, it'll be Biden Warren versus Trump Pence in Wisconsin, Biden Harris versus, you know, and they'll go so on and so forth. And they'll do this a lot between now and then.
Yeah. Just having a little moment of fantasy of imagining Elizabeth Warren debating Mike Pence, and I'm just going to think about that for like an hour, just to have it in my
Honestly,
heart.
it's like Elizabeth Warren debating Mike Pence. I think Kamala would do a great job debating Mike Pence.
Stacey
Abrams. I mean,
him.
just those. Imagining those three debating Mike Pence is a fun debate to think about.
He would short out like a Westworld robot doing the Reagan impression. It would be incredible.
Okay.
Well, there you go. You can think about any one of these debating Mike Pence. There are three things a vice presidential candidate must be able to do well during the campaign. There's really only three things, three moments when they are incredibly important assets to the campaign. These are moments when the media attention is extremely high and they get to shape perceptions of themselves and of the top of the ticket presidential candidate. The first is when they're announced. The second is when they give a speech at the convention. And the third is when they have the vice presidential debate. Those three moments are the moments where a VP candidate is given the spotlight and it becomes an important person. Even in those moments, they may not be determinative, but they do become the moments when they can shine on themselves and also have their strength kind of shine over towards the presidential candidate. Okay. Thinking about a Warren, an Abrams, a Klobuchar, a Whitmer, a Demings, a Cortez Masto. In those moments, we've got to consider those moments. Like there are moments when they've got to be able to step up to the moment, occupy the space, handle it, be prepped, be strong, be able to articulate their views. All right. I'm going to finish here in a second and tell you a couple thoughts about who I think might be the candidates. But before I do that, I want to ask everybody on Zoom to answer a poll question. I'd like to give you a poll question where we ask you to make your choice of who you think Joe Biden is going to pick. All right. So we're going to pop up the poll question right now, and everybody on Zoom, if you can go ahead and offer your selection, and we'll see the answers here. All right. All right, I can't, Paul, I can't see in terms of who's selected. I'm not getting into the results. So when you get to most of the results, go ahead and pop them up so I can see them. I'll share them with folks. All right, so the results are in from the poll, the Zoom gang, and we've got Stacey Abrams at 28%. We got Elizabeth Warren at 26%, and we got Kamala Harris at 22%. Those are the three top selections of who people think Joe Biden is going to pick for the vice presidency. Okay. All right. Abrams, Warren, Harris are the selections here in those orders. And then after that, we go Lujan Grisham, Rice, Klobuchar, Demings. Nobody picked Cortez Masto. Okay. Okay. I want to offer three kinds of choices here to finish up, and then I'll be happy to do some Q&A. So first of all, I want to pick someone that I want to pick the person who I think would be a surprise pick. No, actually, that's not the first thing I want to show you. First, I want to tell you the pick that I think would be the boldest pick, the pick that I think would be the one that would be the most energizing to younger voters and to kind of like the boldest in terms of governing. All right. So the first is what I'm going to call the boldest pick. All right. And I'm going to pick two people, Warren or Abrams, as the boldest pick. That either of them, if Joe Biden picks either of them, then I'm saying, man, this is not the Joe Biden who was there in 2008 or even 2016. That this is a bolder Joe Biden who really sees himself as trying to bring about a transformational moment, whether it's in policies now or to a certain next generation. All right, so that's what I'd call either of those two his boldest picks. All right, there are risks with both of those. All right, they are bold. They would be bold. Second, then I want to pick the person who I think would be a surprise pick, who I think is in the running. And I think would be really, really strong, but would be a surprise pick. And I think that she legitimately might get it. And I picked Val Demings. Val Demings is a very well-respected legislator in Florida. She was named as one of the impeachment managers in the House back during the impeachment proceedings. Has a lot of credibility and respect in the House, and is a major person politically in Florida, this crucial state. Also, she, like Abrams, has a story that resonates with people who are Black Americans descended from enslaved individuals in this country. And that identity is very, very important when we're talking about progress in the political space. So I would say Demings is the kind of like long shot surprise potential. All right. That leads me then to my last pick. So whether it's any of these three or somebody else, who do I think Biden's going to pick? Like, I have no idea. I can't read this guy's mind. And he stunned everybody by even being the nominee. All right. But I think that there is one characteristic that Joe Biden has carried with him, and that is his family and his sense of trust. And Beau Biden, his son, was very close with two of these candidates. All right. He worked with them as attorney generals when he was an attorney general in Delaware. And these two individuals are both people that have been meaningful to Biden over time, and he has that trust and relationship with. So I'm going to end with two who I would say would be at the top of my list right now for Biden to pick. Okay. And it's Kamala Harris and Catherine Cortez Masto. Not one of you picked Cortez Masto. I think that she's got a great chance to be the VP. All right. He has said to Harry Reid, Joe Biden has, that she is one of his top three candidates. That could have just been him saying this because Reid loves her. She is Reid's handpicked successor to Harry Reid in Nevada. But she is an extremely impressive person. And Kamala Harris has this remarkable legislative record and is, someone who has been spoken of as a potential president for quite some time, potential caliber president candidate for some time. So I would put these 5 on my board as the most likely. I would be surprised if Klobuchar was picked. I think very highly of Amy Klobuchar, but I think in this historical moment that he does not need that support in the upper Midwest in the same way that from a white woman, in the same way that he could benefit from these other more diverse candidates. If the woman is going to be a white woman, I think Elizabeth Warren is the one who brings the attributes, the boldness, and the support among diverse voters that he's looking for. So that's my 5 with my, if I was in Vegas, in Cortez Masto State, putting money on particular candidates or going online, because you can make all these bets online. You can do it at certain betting operations. They're legal, political bets. Then I would put it, but I haven't on Harris and Cortez Masto. All right. Hey, thank you so much for joining these lectures, these VP moments. Biden has said that he expects to make a choice in July. Just a second. Hey, buddy. I'll see you later, okay? Good night, buddy. Love you. Biden has said that he expects to make the choice in July. The convention is supposed to be in later July in Milwaukee. Can't really see that happening, but I could see the timing nonetheless unfolding and a virtual convention occurring. So we are really probably in the next 6 weeks looking at the likely nominee. We're moving along. We're less than 6 months out from the presidential election. Thanks for joining these lectures. Thank you so much. All right, I'm going to do a little Q&A now. My bet would be that there is a number of questions to be addressed here in the chat. Okay, let me just take a quick scan of them. A lot of interesting questions here. Okay. I'll start with a question about a couple of you asked about Elizabeth Warren. She's 70 years old. Doesn't that just kind of affirm without addressing the age challenges that Biden has? Yes, certainly a strike against her. It is. The benefit of that is that he gets an incredible person ready to govern now who doesn't project a kind of the age of a Biden. Doesn't project that. She projects the age of a late 50s, very energetic adult who can handle issues and debate them and can stand tall and strong and is super smart. One of the benefits of Warren being 70 also is that it would not hand over the reins of the Democratic leadership for like the foreseeable future, which is what Biden might be doing if he picked anybody else on this list, because they would be seen as the kind of unchallenged next nominee. With Warren, I don't think that would be necessarily distinctly the case given her age. So I think the upsides of Warren's ability to govern now are so very, very high. I think she's in a whole different category on this respect right now. But a downside for her in terms of the ticket is the age. But that could have some benefits for Democrats in general, who might say, well, she's not going to be in charge for sure going forward. There'll be a more competitive post-Joe Biden contest. Some of you have asked about Stacey Abrams in a couple different ways, about her open kind of campaigning for the job, about the fact that she was on MSNBC with Joe Biden the other day at Joe Biden's invitation. about the fact that she doesn't have the governing experience of or kind of high level governmental experience of any of the others. All of that makes her really a complicated person to evaluate here. She does not fit any of the so-called norms of the political space. Campaigning for the vice president is just taboo. People don't do that. She's unabashedly doing it. I kind of think it's compelling that she is. She's making an argument for being seen and heard as an African-American woman, and that this is intentionally to kind of like break the norms. So I'm not too troubled by that. And I don't know if it troubles Biden or not, or the Biden campaign. I haven't seen a yes or a no on that because they're just not talking about this kind of stuff at all. I don't think it particularly hurts her to do that kind of campaigning. She is an ambitious person, and that's great. All of these people are very ambitious. But I do think her lack of governing experience at higher levels is a mark against her, given the crisis that we're in right now. Her highest level position has been a state legislator. She was the minority leader in the Georgia Senate and the Georgia House. That said, Barack Obama was a two-term state legislator before he became a senator, before he became president. He'd only been senator for 4 years when he became president. So I don't think Abrams is out of the realm of possibility. And I think that if Biden wanted to really make a statement that he was going to be a totally bold next generation person, then I think Abrams gets him there more than any of the other candidates. But the downsides are real. The risks are there. That's a high risk, high reward nominee. I kind of want him to do it, and I kind of don't want him to do it because of both of those. Okay. Who does the vetting of these women? Is this Biden's team's responsibility? Does the FBI get involved? Who else gets involved? It is entirely a campaign apparatus. There's nothing official governmental about the vetting. All official governmental documents, police reports, campaign finance forms, donors, any of this kind of stuff that has been part of the record of the candidates is part of what gets vetted, but it's not new material generated by the government for the vetting. This is entirely like a private detective kind of experience. And sometimes there's things missed. That has happened historically with vice presidential candidates, but not very often. Usually the things are caught, and then the candidate has to make a decision. The presidential candidate has to make a decision whether they want to go with the person or not. Joe Biden is a vice president. Remember I talked last time that not a lot of vice presidents have become president in the last 100 years. And that the majority of ones who have become president in US history have become president because of the deaths of the president. So here he is a two-term vice president running on his own merits. He's been through the vetting process. He understands the current media environment. He's gone through the grinder a little bit here on the Tara Reade allegations. So I think the vetting will be very vigorous. Right now, the team that he's put together to vet includes Chris Dodd, former Connecticut senator, and a Delaware state legislator who Biden knows really, really well. Forgetting her name right now, Lisa Blunt Richardson. I think Lisa Richardson Blunt, can't remember. She traveled with Biden to Iowa and to South Carolina. She's a very close confidant of him. They have a long professional relationship. There's a couple other people that are on that. I'm sure it'll be very, very rigorous. Margaret's question here about did Kamala Harris, break the family connection and trust with her attack on Biden in the debate? I think that, yes, she did at the time. She did. And that's part of why it hurt Joe Biden so much. It like literally emotionally hurt Joe Biden. And it clearly pissed off Dr. Jill Biden, who has been, in story after story I've read, has been slower to forgive Kamala Harris for that. That said, Biden, by personality, is the kind of person who forgives. It goes along with his empathy. And part of what makes him Joe Biden, for good or for bad, is that he is able to work with people that he has these really deep disagreements with, on race, on civil rights, on healthcare policy. Him and Bernie is like the only one who gets along with Bernie out of all these major Democratic candidates in 2016 and 2020. It's because he can have these massive disagreements, but the personal character of him allows him to get along. I think that I can totally see Joe Biden getting past that and basically kind of saying, hey, that's actually part of why I wanted to pick her, because I respect that she took her shot, she took her chance, she took her shot, and that we've been through tough times together and we are still family. So I don't think that long-term it hurts Harris. I think we're past that. How about Michelle Obama? Well, that's the question. How about Michelle Obama? Well, yeah, I mean, I love Michelle Obama. Who doesn't love Michelle Obama? Except, many millions of Americans who are nuts. I'd love it to be her. She very clearly has indicated that she does not want to be in office. What candidate appeals to white males and is non-threatening? What candidate appeals to white men and is non-threatening? I assume non-threatening to white men. Well, obviously, Klobuchar hits that mark perfectly. She's at the top of that list. She is the ideal white voter candidate. And if Joe Biden wasn't also a very strong white kind of voter candidate, then Klobuchar could be an ideal choice. But the sentiment I'm seeing from voters of color and strategists is that that's why we selected you, Joe Biden, is that so you would appeal to the white voters. So why would we want Klobuchar to do the same? Why would they pick Klobuchar? Because they've decided that they've got to win those white voters in that swath of states across the top, from Minnesota in the west to Pennsylvania in the east. And that is a very fine electoral college strategy. It is. I really like Amy Klobuchar, and I would be personally disappointed if he selects Amy Klobuchar. I think that he can be more diverse than that. I think he should be more diverse than that. And I think that it's a bolder choice for America to select somebody different. That said, I would have been thrilled to have Klobuchar at the top of the ticket. Okay. Is Val Demings the choice of Clyburn? Clyburn has spoken and said that he would like to have an African-American woman. So has Reverend Al Sharpton. They have both said this. They have not named who they want. It seems like Sharpton really likes Abrams. And it seems like that Clyburn might really like Harris. However, Demings and Clyburn are tight, and they are in that region of the country. And so there aren't many Black Democratic legislators in Congress in that Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Alabama, Mississippi region. So they're all pretty tight, pretty close. I couldn't say that Demings is Clyburn's choice. I think Clyburn would be happy with anybody, would be very happy with any African-American on this list. That said, Clyburn has been a really like the best supporter you could find. Not only did he give that incredible endorsement for Biden in South Carolina, that was such a major game changer, but he also has said quite publicly that he's not going to push Joe Biden, and he's not going to be angry with Joe Biden if Joe Biden doesn't select a Black woman. Clyburn had this great statement. He said, look, we Black voters in the South are the essence of pragmatic voters. We are not going to cut our nose off to spite our face. That if this guy Biden and his presidential administration moves us forward as a country and helps all of us, including African-American voters, and we don't get the ideal vice presidential candidate, he said, we can live with that. We've been living with those kinds of things forever. That said, I think Clyburn is somebody that Biden listens a lot to, and he sure as hell should. Priscilla's bringing up the fact that I did not go back to talking about the independents and who they're going to vote for. I actually think independents are already in Joe Biden's camp. They're in his camp, and that's how he won the nomination. I think that at this point, he doesn't really need another set of a vice presidential candidate who doubles down on that for him. I think that he's, as I mentioned in this lecture, tacking not to the center, but towards the left, because he needs or wants younger voters. He wants progressive voters. He will never go too far because that's not in his DNA. And he's not going to lose, I don't believe, the kind of women suburban voters that are with him. And he's not going to lose the more moderate African-American voters are with him. He can certainly energize either of those camps more, depending upon who he picks. Elizabeth Warren could do that. Stacey Abrams could do that. But I think he already starts with independent voters in this election. That is a massive difference from where Hillary Clinton was in 2016. Question is, do about 3 or 4 more. If Biden is a one-term president, does that affect your analysis? No, I'm expecting Biden to be a one-term president. That's what I'm expecting. I'm expecting it either because he will choose to do that or because he will just see the wisdom of it. Okay. I think that this is the president who, Joe Biden, has this unique thing, this unique moment to be special. Barack Obama was, of course, special because he was the first African-American president. Joe Biden has the chance to be a special white president, somebody who truly built the bridge between being the VP of the first Black president to selecting as the nominee the first female vice president who could go on to potentially be the first female president. Wow, what a bridge that is. From the first Black president to the first female president. That's an unbelievable position. And he's far more likely to achieve that bridge if he's a one-term president rather than a two-term president. I just think that that's the reality of politics, that it is very, George H.W. Bush is the only vice president to ascend to the presidency after a two-term vice presidency in over 100 years in American history. You just don't go 2 terms and then go on at that time to become the vice president, to become president. Richard Nixon couldn't do it. Al Gore couldn't do it. Okay, so the reality is it's just very difficult to do. It's more likely that the first female president gets elected after Joe Biden if he serves 1 term. If the Dems win the presidency, who would make a better presidential candidate for 2024, Abrams or Harris? Well, if Abrams is the VP, then I think she does. But not by a ton, because I think Harris has got a very large national profile and will continue to have a very large national profile. So I think if Abrams is the vice president, then I think Abrams and Harris come into 2024 neck and neck. Okay. If Harris is the VP, I think she's the clear front runner in 2024. All right. I think that her chance to kind of sit in the vice presidency, to gain the stature that comes with that position, and to fill out her profile. She struggled in the campaign to articulate her kind of governing worldview. That's part of what you'll get from being a VP. A couple of questions folks have asked about Hunter Biden. Will Hunter Biden story be much in this election? Well, the Republicans are clearly trying to connect Hunter Biden, Joe Biden through Hunter Biden to China. Is that going to be a major part? I don't think so. I think this election is really first, last, and entirely about Donald Trump and the coronavirus, and the entire Democratic ticket, whether it's Joe Biden and his policies or Joe Biden and his vice presidential candidates, are merely being seen in contrast to Donald Trump and his presidency. So I think that everything is being calibrated to people's perceptions of Donald Trump and the coronavirus. And that's a disaster. That's a disaster. I don't see any of these major criticism that Donald Trump and his sons and others are trying to level at Joe Biden or will level at him and his VP. I don't see them as really sticking. I see them as fundamentally seen as pathetic attempts to smear the vice president because he's got nothing else going. And right now, that's the way these critiques are being seen, the arguments about him being old and so on. Let's see here. Won't Biden reserve Harris for the Supreme Court? Rhoda, it's a good question. There has been some really good analysis about the lack of really unfortunate, outstanding potential picks for the Supreme Court who are Black women. And Biden has made clear he'll select an African-American woman. Harris would be a very good candidate for that. But I don't think that you can think that far out. Like you got to get elected first. So if Harris gets him across the finish line, if he thinks that's the case, then I think he just goes with that. And Frida, you asked a big question here. Governing support. Did I calculate into my conclusions that whoever is VP would need to have cred and experience to be president in case something happened to him? How many of these women are ready to be president? Well, without question, Elizabeth Warren is ready to be president on day one. I think very strongly Susan Rice is ready to be president on day one. Probably they're head and shoulders above everybody else. After them, not far behind, would be Amy Klobuchar and Kamala Harris in the second cluster. So Warren and Rice, Klobuchar and Harris. However, there have been many, many vice presidents who have been selected who weren't ready on day one, but were outstanding and had the potential to grow into the possibility of it. And I could see a Lujan Grisham, a Cortez Masto, absolutely a Val Demings or Stacey Abrams in that category. Okay. I could totally see that. All right, let's see. Okay, I'll finish with this one. Is it possible that Trump's going to change his VP choice to a woman, to potentially Nikki Haley? No, I don't see Trump changing his VP choice because Pence is so important for Trump's connection to white evangelicals, first of all. And second, Nikki Haley would never take the position. And I'm not sure what qualified VP candidate would take it who would help Trump. So Trump would be damaged to like turn his back on Pence. That Nikki Haley, who clearly is going to have a future in national presidential politics, she would not take it. The position. That would be a foolishness on her part. So there are certainly some folks who would take the job, no question, but I just don't see any of them bringing more value to this than Mike Pence already brings to the ticket, given his connection to white evangelicals. So hey, really appreciate you joining these two lectures on the vice president. Thanks for thinking it through. I'm likely going to come back and do these lectures again in about a month. My thinking evolves. Also, there's a lot of people that have indicated an interest in these and would like to check them out. If you're interested in potentially doing some of the work with us in Common Purpose, we are working in states remotely right now. Those key states in the electoral map, they are all states that we are in. And so you can be part of that by signing up for our newsletter. That can be done. It's in the chat list on the Zoom page, on the Zoom kind of link. And it's also in the YouTube comments area. All you got to do is sign up for the newsletter and start to get information from Common Purpose about all the many opportunities we're doing remotely. This is the most important presidential election of our time. This vice presidential nomination selection is very, very important. That's why I did these lectures. Joe Biden can win this. Joe Biden is winning this election currently. And I think the VP candidate, he has the potential, Biden does in his selection to solidify that. Thank you all so much. Have a lovely rest of the evening and I will see you soon. Take care and be safe.